for an extra 5 minutes so we can give Scott some questions. Scott's going to talk about interfacing up to augmented reality, so I will. Oh, yeah. But you need some. Yeah, you need some screen.
While we're doing that, I'll introduce myself. Nice to talk, Mel, earlier, wherever you are.
She had to run.
Sorry?
She had to run, but she said thanks for having her.
So, yeah, she mentioned her background. So I should just kill the titles. Mention mine. My first job was a stripper. And, not for shooting. I stripped the paint off airplanes. And, I learned a lot about design. It was probably my first lesson in design. A lot of paint being taken off the planes with acid, bolts coming off, panels coming off. It was a big design lesson. Anyway, that's killed time, so that was doing that job. There we go. Alright. Okay, so these are a few things that I like to focus on. So I've thrown myself into the deep end after being a stripper. Thrown myself into the deep end of technology. And with that, it's pretty important for me to remind myself that I'm human, and so are others. So with projects I've been doing in this space since about 2009, I've always looked at this human-first approach. But then also, it was brewing in me, I met one of the people involved with the Girl Effect from Nike Foundation. And they're focused on the bottom billion population, in particular helping girls in villages. And one of the great things he mentioned to me about design was, if you design for the people in the bottom billion, then there's a common denominator, you're going to be able to help the rest of the world. Whereas a lot of people in tech at the moment, let's do mobile first, or let's do Android first, or whatever. But let's, I guess, go back to this point about being human and remembering humanity. So I'm kind of strange in Sydney in a way. I've never taken drugs, but each and to their own, and I'm happy for everyone to enjoy all the different experimenting. But the thing I love about augmented reality is it's not what you see. Well, it's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see. And there are so many ways to interpret this world. And there was a slide earlier tonight about poetry, using text and electronics to make poetry. And augmented reality has really opened that opportunity. So initially when I was working in this area, a lot of people thought, I don't know how well this is working for you at the moment. Hands up anyone taking acid. Oh well, we got a couple of takes.
Joe, you can not do that anytime you like.
But often they would ask me, you have to be off your dial to get into this space. And what's interesting is we only really experience a little of reality. At the moment, there's gamma rays, X-rays, all sorts of rays running through your bodies at the moment, and you're not aware of it. Because as humans, we're tuned into this small sliver, which is a tenth of a trillion wavelengths through the electromagnetic radiation. And so, if we consider how other animals perceive life, what is real? And so that's why I'm open to these alternate realities. And so Frank Bolton, who was the creator of Wizard of Oz, actually did something in 1901 called the Master Key. Does anyone know the Master Key? No? Okay, so in the Master Key, he wrote about, more or less, an augmented reality head-up display. And it would allow you to look at people and you would see a letter symbolising their character. So back then, he actually joked in this that it would be about 100 years before this technology would come to life. And what do you know, he's right. And there's something else on the back of this. I met a friend who had met someone who had met Einstein the other day. And they were told as a schoolgirl by Einstein when they went to visit him in the lab. A few key things. And the little girl asked, how can I be as smart as you? And Einstein said, read fairy tales. And then she got thinking, and as a kid does, let's challenge this guy. He might be the world's smartest. How do I be smarter than you? She thought she had him. He thought for a while, and he came back, read even more fairy tales. So I think that's an important message with what we're all doing. And I think with Frank Baum, he was considering the evolution of man to be like this, as in not necessarily Wi-Fi symbols, but we would empower, we would have additions to our senses, not just substitutions for our senses. But we've kind of ended up like this in the last decade or two. But then we jump to Maslow and our hierarchy of needs. And I think underlying all of what you see there is stories. And in fact, stories filtrate all the way up through. Even our physiology, inside our brains, it's more or less silent and kind of dark, except for the synaptic connections and so on going on. But what's making sense of the inputs from hearing and seeing is the stories of how all the kind of input data connects. Because actually, we are at a stage now where blind people are tasting sight, for example. So there's other examples where the visual cortex is being in a way repurposed as a one-trick pony for the people who are blind. So there's some really interesting things going on, and working in augmented reality, I've had to really kind of step back to the neuropsychology. And so, you know, and I think recently it was quite interesting to learn on a TED Talk actually about inverts. Anyone know what an invert is? Big points if you do. So basically it's about sensing your surrounds. So as I was mentioning earlier, as a human, we've got a little snout which can take little bits of air. But if you're a dog, you're actually relying on your snout, a large one, and you've got so much more power as far as, you know, I know a cat was over there a few hours ago, my neighbour was just here yesterday and so on, and humans, look at them with their pathetic little noses. So there's these little things that we can pick up from various animals in the animal kingdom while they're still there. So augmented reality, what is it? Largely it's understood as a mix of data and atoms, in a sense. But it's not just visual, it can be all sorts of other senses. In fact, the industry, I guess, has been in a commercial sense alive since 2009, 2010. And it's growing. It's about $1.5 billion worth at this stage. In a couple of years it'll grow to about $5 billion. So that's not bad. That's on a par with 3D printing. But there's a real identity crisis, even in the industry. So Boeing were the guys who came up with the head-up display and looked at wires and saw, you know, which wires to play with, which ones to leave alone through an augmented head-up display. And Thomas Cordell is responsible for calling this thing augmented reality. So for a lot of people that's a mouthful. In fact, one of my old teammates playing sport said to me, Scott, I really love this augmenting reality that you're doing. And like as I said before, I don't have any problem with reality, but all our realities are different, and let's appreciate that. But one of the early players is Steve Mann here. Anyone know Steve Mann? This guy fixed eyewear to his head permanently since about 1980. So an early adopter. He liked to call it mediated reality because it wasn't just about adding. We could also diminish reality, which is what you do at the pub sometimes. Anyway, moving on. Comes along some brands who think, augmented reality, how am I going to get the agency people to remember that name? I've got to give them something with more substance, and maybe even my brand can own this whole space. This guy actually does a lot of good work, and he's done some good case studies. But articulated naturality just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? But now we got the blippers and blipping and blips and so on from the UK. They just got themselves 45 million investment the other day, and they look like being the main player in augmented reality. For the next year or two, there will be other challenges coming most definitely, as Hewlett-Packard, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, all the rest have invested. And speaking of big investments in the space, Magic Leap, and this is an amazing technology. Not yet has it really seen the light of day. There's probably another year or two, speculating. that they have to work in the labs before meeting the public. But they've kind of differentiated themselves on cinematic reality. And it's kind of an important point. I guess I almost throw in, make my change, almost throwing in between augmented reality, because a lot of the early augmented reality was this experience which was disjointed. You'd have this computer graphics imagery on top of the real world. It was like on top of the real world. It wasn't in it. So it was hard to believe and be a part of. But now that's changing a lot because, for example, you know, we've got great 3D engines that are got great SDKs with augmented reality, and things can operate seamlessly. We can understand lighting in the surrounds and so on. So I've got a challenge in life. One is my nieces, who are constantly taking my phone off me to play things like Unicorn Rainbow Fart Surprise. So, you know, here we are again, back to the evolution of man and women and children fixated on the screen. And so, thankfully, I've read a little bit of Victor's book, and I'm looking at how is my little niece, who's 7 years old to 3 years old, how's their world going to change in 10 years' time? They're able to drive a car, but actually they won't drive a car because it'll be self-driving. But by the time they reach 18, 21 years old, this world will be phenomenally different. And this is a lovely bit of art with a lot of people looking at their screens, and in a way, that's kind of the track we've been going down. And that's why I'm so passionate about being able to leverage our data contextually, naturally, in our real world. So it's augmented in reality, AIR, if you like. And one person that's backing me up, and this doesn't relate at all to my stripping earlier in life, but so Tim Berners-Lee calls the World Wide Web like the neon light of the internet. So indicating that the internet has vastly more purpose than just these web pages and apps that we're kind of creating today. So thinking beyond that, how are we going to marry wearables, the Internet of Things, and augmented reality to change our lives? Not just for the everyday able person, disabled, blind, deaf, and so on. People from the bottom billion to the top billion. But I'm right up against this dude. And, well, in a way, he has a point. We've got to be very careful about what kind of wearables we put on the face. I think it's inevitable. You know, I'm prepared to say Johnny's wrong. And I don't mean to upset anybody here, but this is the little joke on designers. Just take it on the chin. So, and perhaps blame Emerson because he was the one that gave people this freedom. But what's ironic is Apple has a fair few patents around wearables on the face. So, like with a lot of their other competitors in the top echelons of digital media and technology, there's a lot of activity around this use of augmented reality, wearables, Internet of Things. So, here's someone else who would disagree with wearables on the face. Allow me to introduce you to the star-nosed mole, who senses the world with these little feelers on its face, which register the world in 3D. Imagine you being able to do the same, but without these little feelers. And we'll be able to do that, and in a sense we are already able to do that with eyewear. And we're just busy in the industry, I guess, reducing the form factor or designing the form factor in such a way that, I guess, like we went from the miniaturized Apple earphones to the bulky Beats, which made a real statement. So I'm kind of forgiving of large form factors for eyewear, just so long as obviously it's not going to break your nose. And then, generally speaking, as we combine in a pot the wearables, Internet of Things, and augmented reality, and then I think, we're helping humans gain all these new senses, all these new abilities. We're in fact kind of making superhumans. And I'm sure most people here have seen The Matrix. where actually she downloaded, Tracy I think it was, so Trixie, she downloaded an instruction manual for a helicopter, well, into a brain, and then flew straight away. With augmented reality in eyewear, you won't need to do that. It's just kind of there. It's data organized on top of your dashboard. But how did they make the pyramids? How did humans make pyramids?
Go away.
Yeah, go away. Here we go, let's start again. I'll start from the top. So, I was a stripper when I was... Cool. Alright. So, I'm real fascinated at how they make the pyramids. Here is when I have an angry outburst at Aristotle, who got popular thinking to have everyone believing that we're really got 5 senses. And I believe there are so many other senses that we can tap into. In fact, up until this wearables augmented reality revolution, or evolution, we've been, as humans, in a way, working like feature phones. But just like the capabilities of smartphones are growing exponentially, there's so much more to being a human. And Ray Kurzweil, the head engineer at Google, suggests 2045 will be indistinguishable as whether we're human or machines. In a way, I don't know anyone here who may be wearing a pacemaker or a cochlear implant already. So, in a way, already we're here. But 2045 is suggested it will be thick and fast. And today, or in the last 24 hours at the F8 conference, Facebook made a number of announcements. And this is really interesting. I guess in the algorithm it's debatable how much weighting goes to pumping up some text on your wall compared to photos and videos, what gets most traction. But most definitely, Facebook have realized this is pretty awesome for engagement and for revenue. And of course, then Mark's made the heavy bet of $2 billion into Oculus. So just today they've announced that on Facebook you'll be able to tap into a spherical video experience on your 2D screen. And whereas if you put on the Oculus later on, or the Samsung Gear, you'll be able to have that in a VR experience. And this is really, really interesting because at the moment, if you go to watch a movie in the cinema, you've seen it once. Think about going to watch a VR movie and how many times you're going to actually kind of go back to experience it. So we're in this attention economy, this experience economy. And there's, at the moment, a ton of clutter, but it's all in 2D. And I guess imagine this new VR, AR world where, like maybe in 10 years from now, you say to your kids or whatever, like, there was a time we used to watch media and it was flat. We had flat screens. So, and we used to watch it together. In VR, maybe not. There'll be ways to collaborate in VR, of course. In AR is, I guess, different by definition in this sense, in that AR is more recognizing the real world. And so, as well as all the clutter we have, and the advertisers trying to break through, we have 50,000 thoughts a day, 5,000 advertising messages. Our brains learn to filter all of this. But in this constant bombardment, in this world where we're hyper-connected, we're also in cities, in rural, in elderly, in third world, we're lonely and we're getting more depressed. There's more and more mental health issues coming to the fore. So to make augmented reality experiences, to cut through in this experience economy, it's been rather expensive. You usually looked at projects taking 4 to 8 weeks to build. A lot of back and forth because there's a lot of, I guess, exponentially greater amount of questions compared to your UX considerations for 2D. And so, when developer costs are 5 to 10K a week, that adds up. But now we're looking to ways where more or less you can have point and shoot type augmented reality production. And then of course there's the neuromarketing. So principally we're visual creatures. So that is the awesome thing that augmented reality and virtual reality has going for it. It is really right up there and hard to compete with for engagement. Then, of course, there's a couple of other considerations I'm putting into my problem statements, and one is, there's only one of us physically. How, in a way, can you be anywhere else in the world, human to human? So an issue obviously for celebrity, but also friends and family as we traverse the world more. And then of course, here's the aspirational benchmark. Sci-fi movies have really cut the path for us and predicted our future technologies. And so in a way, I guess, Tupac experienced massive album sales when he came on stage as a hologram at Coachella, and Michael Jackson's followed suit. We've had an Indian Prime Minister voted on the back of being a hologram in hundreds of villages around India, which he otherwise would not have got to. And then, of course, as a hologram, full respects to Malala, but as a hologram, you're bulletproof. So, in the storytelling clock, we've gone from the campfire situation where we look at each other in the whites of our eyes, and that's really important because certain neurotransmitters are firing. Just 2 to 3 degrees off the whites in your eyes, those neurotransmitters stop. And this affects trust, loyalty, and persuasion. So that's why companies like Atlassian, Combank, whoever else is here, spend money on staff flying to have meetings, to get that face-to-face time. We are going to be moving into a future where we won't need to do that because we'll be able to replicate that direct line, eye-to-eye, whites in the eye kind of communication. But as we went around the storytelling clock, we distance ourselves with telephone or film. People even in the theatre were up on stage unreachable. You couldn't really see the whites in their eyes. And as we moved around to TV, it was remote. Yeah, maybe we get the close-up now and then, but you were still kind of disjointed from this wall, this fourth wall, as some people might know in the entertainment space. And then as mobile comes, there's something happening here. And with PCs, Macs, laptops, the media is getting closer to the eye, it's getting more personalised, and then we're moving into the world of augmented reality, virtual reality, where the media is getting closer to the eye and again more personalised. And I love this little cartoon which more or less captures the last 20 years. And we're at that point now, we're just about to walk away from our desk, which has huge implications for productivity, safety, collaboration, all sorts of things. Now, I'll start scooting through the slides pretty quick, so I'll leave time for questions. One of my first experiences of augmented reality, just from my research, was Nike True City. And one of the things I pretty quickly got to understand is you could do some pretty shit hot things in post-production, which you would dream about having in the real world. These floating symbols, which Mario Brothers style, they make these fancy sounds, and you tap them, and you could leave annotations on the real world, and live, I guess, in this futuristic Pac-Man, Mario Brothers fantasy world. And it's about, I guess, leveraging all this big data. So you can imagine how Yelp would feed into this, for example. But now, on Kickstarter, a recent successful campaign is combining data from ozone, carbon dioxide, all sorts of air quality measures, so mothers can realise, and like Nike suggested in this campaign, make the hidden visible. And so now we're making the hidden visible for human health, where you couldn't have seen those nasties before. And everything's connected, so even sheep are giving off Wi-Fi in New Zealand. Our plants are connected, and rubbish bins, so we're more able to economically manage logistics with collection of rubbish, and we can have that solar driven as well. This was one of my other really big time favourite inspirations of augmented reality, although I don't fancy McDonald's too much, but good on them for having this awesome meal tray, and of course there's some health diagnosis there, which relates to the healthy meal, obviously. So that inspired to have my first client in augmented reality in 2009. You won't believe how it was to sign a client up before anyone knew augmented reality, before Jobs allowed access to the camera on the iPhone. It was out of this world, shoot by the hip. No one really knew anything. And of course, back in the day, we had to work off these black and white markers, which you had to specially print out at home. So we actually did this experience related to the TVC they had with these emoticons floating above people's heads. And there was a lot of work done on it. We're about to deliver, and we pretty much got this message from our interim agency. He was trying to make it work, but it wouldn't. And there were some simple things where he actually had 3 sessions of the webcam open, and eventually after troubleshooting a lot of things, we were able to work out what went wrong. But one of the temptations in the early days of augmented reality companies is, one, we can do everything. This technology is going to take over the world. It's going to be everywhere, in every industry, every lifestyle. And the other thing is, when creating stuff, to make it super hyper interactive and do one thing on the left hand and one on the right. It was almost like we were treating people like octopus. And we did this awesome day for HSBC rugby where you would kick for goal and those posts would be in your own environment. So that was pretty amazing. But feel free to ask me questions on some of those first experiences later. I'm very proud to introduce to you this very refined iStock photo. I've been waiting for a chance to display it. Feel free to take a photo with me. I'm on the Instagram. I'm side agnostic as well, left or right, that's okay. So what this slide helps me present though is that the business development managers in augmented reality are super important, and you need to work closely with them from the very get-go, because they're the ones, I guess, suggesting the initial creative ideas on what is and what isn't possible. And there's a lot of bottlenecks should you start down the wrong road. So, and there's other problems as well as far as provision of assets. So there's one client from the first couple of years in my augmented reality work where they were having a secret campaign and couldn't share any assets until the last 2 days. Oh my God. Just to summarize, augmented reality requires different optimization of 3D models compared to other kind of 3D work. Winding up. Okay, cool. Okay. So we got to learn about, the difference between interactive video and interactive augmented reality, difference between one-way interactive and two-way, traditional, digital, and it was all about this really. I'm going to just scoot through some stuff. Spend a minute on this. This was a stadium experience for us to do. It was super amazing. We were asked to do like this Life of Pi Disney experience with augmented reality see-through display in a stadium. And we actually produced it. And it was very amazing. We needed to understand structurally everything around the stadium. A lot of intense work over 6 weeks actually. We built a world's first head-up display as well as the animation. And then we came back to Australia again to start serving clients, and everyone sees things differently, of course. I'm guessing you know the elephant fable. So we were told by one client, people are sick of apps. This was about 3 years ago. People stopped downloading apps, and we want to control what they're looking at. So for years and years, this was in the property industry, they were controlling fly-throughs in buildings and so on. And augmented reality gives the user freedom. For goodness sakes, that's what actually gets you longer engagement time, more commitment. And we're able to understand venues and outdoors like this. We can map cities in days, hours even. And as we move along in the cars, this is where a huge augmented reality opportunity is in the windscreen once we have the self-driving cars and the mapping of the world. This was a huge experience for Transformers. It was the first time a 3D Unity engine was incorporated with augmented reality. We worked with Michael Bay on this, and we had 2.5 million downloads in a couple of weeks. That was pretty huge. IKEA made big breakthroughs in augmented reality, having it in all their catalogues around the world. Property stuff. I was going to talk about...
Really do need to rest.
Really do need to rest. Okay,
Yes.
all right. Okay, so pretty much that's it. Can you do a few minutes? Or?
I can do 1 more minute and then we will
Right, okay, no worries. Okay, so this is an example of the studio in augmented reality. I was going to play a puppy movie, but we'll have to move on. Basically what this is... basically what this is the camera recognising an actual dog and giving you the visual feedback that what breed it is and various other dogs like it and in the area and so on. So we're having this smart new camera now, which is almost human. And we're moving into this head-up world. And I believe Google Glass was a huge success. Of course, commercially it's not yet, but it's made many breakthroughs for investment in this space. Here's your 3D understanding of the world. Motorbike helmets, huge success on Kickstarter. Our ambition here. Now this is about the hologram interaction, proxemics, about the use of personal space. Being able to give this Jedi experience, getting the light in the eye, getting CGI almost lifelike, and the huggable internet, where a friend of mine actually connected his chicken remotely to the internet and was able to, through the Internet of Things and augmented reality, pat it. In New Zealand, the Artificial Intelligence Baby Project, look that up, and we've got sci-fi writers now developing an optimistic future. And everybody gets a robot!
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Clearly, we should have given you an hour, which is completely my fault. I'm sorry. So we have, unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but if Scott is up for, sorry, let me just borrow that. Are you going for
No, I'll be here.
We do have drinks at the Occidental, and if you want to know where that is, this is us here. That's the Occidental.